Well, added a big chunk of code.
Pretty much all, like a baby agent.
Still pretty impressed. Hello and welcome back to the Feature Crew. Today we have another AI Devs try, and as hotly requested, we're going to try out Cursor today. So Cursor's this new sort of AI-assisted coding IDE. We wanted to record our actual reactions to it live here. Jacob, anything to add?
No, that's it. Just that I don't have Cursor on my computer. I've never seen Cursor. Dylan did a little bit of prep work to make sure he was ready for the video, but my reactions will be first time and Dylan's will be like second time or whatever.
Awesome. And it has been very popular on tech Twitter and all that, so I am interested to give it a spin. So we're going to look at two things today. First of all, we want to look at fixing an actual small project. As we get to know this a little bit better, we might try it with like a big open source project, but for now we're trying to at least scope down the problem a bit. So we'll start with that, and then we're also going to see how it does building from scratch and compare that to, say, Replit agents and a few other videos we've done. So what we have here is something we generated from our previous video. Go ahead and go watch that. We used O1 Mini and O1 Preview to generate different games. They're called Serverville. But the problem was, I will bring up the game. As we were iterating with O1, the button got removed. So I want to see how well Cursor does immediately at trying to figure out like what needs to be fixed here and just using it to make this a little bit better. So given I know how to like do web dev, I know where this should be. So let's go ahead and look to see if Cursor is smart enough to do that. So we need to go down and this is not great code. It made everything in one file just so we could get O1 spun up. But right here in the div, you can clearly see there should be a button, right? So if we hit enter here, I'm expecting it to be able to, and it does, know that we need to add a button. Interestingly, it's now saying add some more buttons. Previously, I think the idea was you just click the button once, but hey, I'm going to go ahead and accept those changes. At the very least, that was super snappy. I just went to the place we needed to, and it immediately was like, hey, you should go do this. Actually, we shouldn't put it here. We should put it here.
Yep.
So that's kind of a user error, but I am impressed at how fast it kind of snaps. Like I wonder if I click here, okay, no more recommendations, but it does give recommendations really fast when it does. I'm going to go ahead and save this and see if that kind of fixed our initial problem, just to see where we're currently at. So now that we've relaunched it, we can see the buttons that we just added are here. Let's see if it's working. No. So it wasn't smart enough to fully fix it up. I think the problem is it needed to just say buy GPU. So unfortunately, it hasn't worked as expected. We need to fix this up. I'll give it one more try to see if it can autocomplete correct. Maybe not. Then let's go ahead and actually pull up the chat window. So it does have a chat window. I'm going to highlight this and see how it does when I specifically tell it something. So I'm going to ask it, we need a button for the users to purchase GPUs. This is what it needed to do. It had to have buy GPU instead of, buy GPU 1, 2, 3. So typically it looks like we're supposed to go ahead and click apply. Then it takes a while to load. And then there's this kind of like, almost like, get diff thing where you get to see what
inline diff.
So inline diff. I'm going to go ahead and accept that. And now if we save and then bring this back up, then it should work. Anyway, this is what we had previously built with O1. Everything's just overheating with so many events. Now it kind of is a bit of a game, and at least we fixed up having a button. So previously we couldn't even do that at all. So now it's back to being kind of a pseudo game. So now why don't we go ahead and try and fix that problem we just saw where it just kept spamming us with dialogues. So I'm going to give that in the chat window because I wanted to see how it's able to, just for this simple project, conceptualize it. Can you make it so they only spawn every 30 seconds? So let's give it a kind of high level request and see how it goes. That is not exactly what I wanted. That was my bad. I should have clarified. I was talking about so I've just gone ahead and refined the request to say it's about cooling out electricity. Again, this is Sonnet, but it says, I apologize for the misunderstanding. You're referring to the alert dialogues of power. So it did readjust correctly, and that is looking roughly correct.
So this is worth calling out that when it's applying, it seems like it's doing another LLM call. Like, it generates the code, and then it does another LLM call where the LLM reads over, where does this new code snippet go in the old code?
That's true. This does look correct looking at it, so that's great. But you're right. It probably does another call like that to be able to make it a diff. So we're going to go ahead and reset. And then if we come back up, now if I buy GPU, let's see. So you go unlock GPU and it should, yeah, that's better. So it's not making any balance. And if we wait 30 seconds, it'll start to spam us with the cooling and power. But I guess theoretically you're supposed to know that, hey, like you need to go buy these things. So now at least we can go ahead and do those things without it being annoying. Still pretty impressed with the original, just couple of shot prompt to get this. But that's great. So, honestly, so far with the Sonnet stuff, it seems useful. But again, I still don't know how different this is to VS Code plus Copilot.
Yeah, so far we've only really seen features. I'm not sure if there's anything else here, but the chat and then the inline complete are both features of Copilot. I think the only thing that's potentially different here is Copilot decides where code goes before it's written, it seems like. And the apply, well, the diff is a very similar UX. The apply kind of happens immediately. Yep. Whereas here there seem to be two LLM calls going on. And so that's like the only difference that I was able to notice. So other than the model in the background being different, that small difference in like the actual flow of the human actions and LLM calls is a little different between this and Copilot. Yep. But this is all stuff that I've done, similar difficulty tasks with Copilot. So not blowing me out of the water yet.
The chat works as expected. Diffing and all that is about expected. So let's go ahead and switch over to now building something from scratch.
So now the next thing I want to try is, we have this game, the logic works. We saw the alerts popping up before, so we know that the checks are happening, right? Like the game is working behind the scenes, but the UI is still pretty much, it's treating it like a web app. So I'm kind of wondering if we can prompt it to make it look a little bit more like a game. I was thinking maybe if we most of the Farmville and most of these sort of simulation games from that 2010 era are like isometric. So I wonder if we could prompt it to say like, oh, make this look a little bit more like a game, use like sort of an isometric art style. It looks like Dylan's pulling up a new feature here.
Yes, so there is the compose feature. Control-I brings up compose mode, which I think is supposed to be a little bit more inline, actually like makes probably bigger chunks of code. So I want to try that versus the chat mode and see if there's any other additional features here. So let's say we want it to look more isometric. Make it more like a game, please. Let's see. Slow request.
So this is a bit of a more open-ended question, right? Mm-hmm. Like we haven't given it the like point by point of what we want it to do. We just kind of threw out isometric as a direction and then said make the graphics better.
Okay. Well, I added a big chunk of code. It has an isometric container, and then it's made this tab that's saying keep existing styles, new styles for isometric view. Well, I'm going to go ahead and accept all. And let's see how it did. Okay. Interesting. Oh. There is a grid here, but let's buy one more GPU. Sure. Nothing. Doesn't look like it really did anything.
We can try one more prompt of like make the GPUs appear on the grid.
The other side, that issue is likely due to the missing image files for GPUs. Let's modify this code to use colored blocks.
Colored blocks. Now. All right. It is,
I mean, to be fair, it does say to fully implement this, you'll need to do this. Add animations, implement zooming. So that was kind of on me, not actually reading it. I'm going to click accept all and just see if it does. Well, there's there's a little bit going on. It's just little grid things.
Okay, but this is progress. This is real progress.
Cooling. I wonder if we add like a number 2 GPU. It's technically there. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool. Like, it's starting to have this sort of thing, and I don't know. We could continue prompting.
I'm not sure what else it would have done based on what we said.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's interesting. I still think there's always going to be this gap of, like, we want images. I wonder, I might even just ask it, can you make an image in SVG format and see if that allows it to be a little bit better.
Like, yeah, maybe improve the visual representation or something.
Let's see how it goes. Props to the Replit Agents demo, and we'll link that vid. That was quite radically different in the fact that you could give it something open, it would go and make files, you could see all this lovely UX. Again, this feels slightly different, and it might be like a small side grade or upgrade in some cases, but it's not radically different from what we previously had. Which is surprising given how much hype there's been around Cursor. Mm-hmm. And then let's see what it automatically did just for visual. Oh yeah, I mean, now the GPUs have little green squares, the power plant is a house, the cooling looks like it's a compass. But that's cute. I mean, we could continue iterating all day. And this is the amazing thing about having this AI power capability that now anyone can do this, right? Of course, we know a little bit more technically. That's why I know oh, this is where the button needs to go and so on. But I'm really trying to do this blind, where I just blindly accept things and not looking at the diffs to see how it's doing in this kind of world. Let's switch over to trying out how it does creating from scratch. Okay. Yeah, awesome. All right, so now I've made a fully fresh folder, completely from scratch, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open the AI pane, and let's also just open Compose. So, Compose.
Yeah, let's definitely do Compose.
Yeah, let's try this. So, I'm going to give it a prompt that we predefined before.
And then let's also just mention the isometric thing in this one. I don't know if we just add a bullet point. So hopefully we'll get a really good result. It'll build the whole file from scratch here. It'll build the whole game from scratch. Then we can kind of compare it to what O1 Mini built, with obviously a little help from Cursor here at the beginning of the video.
So what we're going to do is we had a predefined prompt. Shout out to some Twitter users. We're saying we're going to try and make an app, and we're about to give it a prompt to say what it needs, and it's going to ask for clarifications and so on, so that we're able to anything that's underbaked is going to ask, and then we hope it will go ahead and create files or create the structure it needs. So it says, understood, please provide your initial idea for the app. So it was very similar to the popular game Fireball. So we're now adding, we want to make a web client-based game called Serverville. It's very similar to the one we were just trying to fix, where we want to basically have it add GPUs, and similar to Farmville, we're just trying to grow basically a server farm. So I'm going to go ahead and send it through. And it's giving us a few clarifying questions, like who's the target audience, what are the specific features you'd like to incorporate, how do you envision progression. So we're just going to go ahead and fix those up. So we typed in a few just supplementary questions. For example, we want it to be this minimalist isometric view, and so on. So we're going to see how it goes. And at the very least, the awesome thing is it looks like it's knowing it's executing a plan, so it created the HTML file. Maybe I tried chat mode previously and it wasn't creating, so I mean, that's great. This is honestly kind of similar to Replit agents.
Yeah,
and the fact that
it is somewhat agentic here, right? It's worth noting. It didn't just create the HTML file; it created the game.js file, it created the CSS file.
Yeah.
So yeah, it made a multiple step plan and executed here. Is it right?
Yeah. Let's try it first. Okay. Here we go. So just pulled it up. Unfortunately, it is very bare bones. It doesn't have any game at all. So. Yes, that was a good call to check it. It's obviously not as fully fleshed as when we tried O1, which actually understood everything.
It's not working at all. It's not even a game.
But to be fair, it says next steps would be to implement the shop system for buying and upgrading, add more detailed server mechanics, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to say, go ahead and do all these. Make it a game. Go ahead and do all of those. It really does things step by step, right? The first thing was actually just create the files, as opposed to being hey, here's this massive file. Create the files, then come back to the user and wait. This updated version adds all these things to make the game even more engaging. It should allow us to buy, it should have a basic achievement system, improved UI with notifications, more detailed resource generation management. So I'm going to go ahead and accept game.js as well. And let's not look too much into it. Let's immediately see what it's built. So we just pulled it up. It's at least looking a little bit better. There's power surge, weather. I mean, if I can add a basic server.
Looks like maybe buying doesn't work.
Buy your first server, own 5 servers, server tycoon. Okay, well, it looks like I can only click on these squares. It's kind of interesting how it's decided to try and do that.
It didn't pick up on the isometric idea. I've had Sonnet do an isometric view before, so.
Yeah. Well, let's continue prompting it and also give it some feedback. Make it isometric. It's trying to calculate that isometric position for each cell. These changes will give your serverable game an isometric look. So we will now look at the actual game. And yeah, I mean, again, technically true, kind of, but we're also seeing it's kind of clipping over here. And did say you might need to adjust the styles a bit, fair. But to be fair, this is not a critique of Cursor. This is now a critique of Sonnet and so on.
Right.
But compose mode seemed to work as expected.
I'm actually very impressed. I'm very impressed by compose mode. It is pretty much like a baby agent. What feature does Cursor have that Copilot does not? It's this. It's the compose mode that's somewhat agentic.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty impressive. I might start using Cursor now that I've seen this.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think from an engineering perspective, I'm getting to the point where we could continue prompting it. Is it really going to fix things? I'm not too sure. Even here, it's probably going to be easier just to rip out what it did and actually implement it properly. So
But just for the viewer, like, why do you feel that way? Because we just saw it succeed at everything we asked. And
Well, honestly, part of what I feel is as I continue, like either it needs to make really big jumps that I'm like, wow, that did exactly what I said. Like for example, in O1, we gave it a single prompt and it went so much further into making the vision of the game. Here, I'm going to keep accepting, and then there's always this thing like a context switch where now I have to go back, understand the code, and then try and add on to it. Whereas being someone technical, I would have rather just made the code myself, maybe through the autocompletes, right? That might be actually faster than now having to go back and understand like, hey, like what did it actually change? And part of that is maybe if we were doing this properly, I would like fully read what composer said, go check all the like diffs and do it. But sometimes it's actually a lot faster to just be like, hey, I know what I'm doing. But if you're not technical, what does offset X and offset Y mean?
I guess what I'm getting I'm getting at is like, but this tool isn't made for non-technical people. It's an IDE.
True.
Like,
but then why would I just not use VS Code and Copilot? Like, I guess
because this thing is agentic and does multiple steps. Like, I'm just trying to figure. Like, I'm not blown away here. I don't think this is changing software development, but I think we've found the reason for the hype. It might be the best tool for a software developer today to use AI to make their work faster.
You're right. I think from the lens of a technical user, there is at least a small upgrade relative to VS Code. Even if that's just the ability to like switch in the models and use compose mode, that alone is at least a semi-upgrade relative to GitHub Copilot, right? If you're in like a proper like dev shop, I'm not too sure. Like that's TBD. And I think right now we're kind of testing it in a very small case. If it does well on a much like bigger code base, that would be very impressive. So maybe it does exceptionally well there. But you know, I definitely don't think this is like smoke. I don't think this demo is, for example, as impressive as Replit Agents, which was very focused on UX and like, wow. But this does seem to be like an incremental upgrade.
Yeah, I think it's impressive. I'm gonna use the composer thing more and put it through its paces. Replit's cool, like Dylan was mentioning, because it can take screenshots and it can understand the resulting like visuals, and then iterate based on them. And so until we have something like that here, I think you're gonna hit a lot of, if you try to do anything that has to do with visuals, you're gonna end up in a lot of situations like we had with that isometric grid that was like clipping and overlapping.
Yep.
But right now the problem with something like, just using a chat client or something to leverage the code generation capabilities of like a 3.5 Sonnet or like a 4.0 is that you do get to a point eventually where like, oh, it can only really write one file or a very small amount of files, and then you're manually managing context, copy and pasting things between chats. This composer feature seems to limit the copy and pasting the most without fully making the user depend on composer. So in some ways it sits in between Copilot and Replit, and just today, with today's technology, that might be the best place to sit. In a couple days, it might not be anymore, right?
I agree. I think it's a great way to put it. I was kind of getting stuck between the two, right? Of GitHub Copilot is probably what I use day to day. We work in a big dev shop. We're not going to switch over to an unknown vetted, tool. Replit Agents is this incredible, like, potentially, I mean, right now it's kind of smoke because you barely can play with it, but it offers this interesting thing of now it's fully like, even from your phone, you could like maybe type in a prompt and it would run, it spins up the resources and yada yada. Interesting. As you say, this sits exactly in the middle, and I think is super interesting. Maybe if you're just getting started in tech or like a beginner as well, like it could have a lot of benefit, right? Because it can be agentic, help you out with that as you're learning and stuff like that. That's great. And even for more experienced people, like it's just tedious always having to make files, and it at least has that agentic property. So yeah, I totally agree with that. I take back some of my previous comments. Yeah.
Dylan, though, I do agree with like this idea of what is it actually taking out of the development process? And one of the reasons why something like Replit's so exciting is because it starts to take out some of those tedious things that you do as a dev, like constantly rerunning and, like, I don't know, the deployment stuff or writing tests. And like, I'm sure this can write tests, but in terms of some of the other tedious things, like it actually looks like Cursor takes on writing code and then leaves the human to be its assistant. Now you have to test the code that Cursor wrote, and then you have to do the tedious process of like figuring out where the error is, or like taking a screenshot of the UI and sending it off to Cursor, even though I don't think it supports. I guess the overall point is just that it doesn't, like, even if Cursor's working to the best of its ability, the developer is still taking on a lot of the kind of more annoying tasks of development.
Yep.
So until something like Replit or GitHub Copilot Workspace comes along to have like a fully integrated AI development environment, I do agree with some of Dylan's like conclusions of like, well, am I going to switch to this? Maybe not. Probably not.
Alrighty, well, thank you so much for joining us on this AI Devs Try. If you have any other recommendations for what we should look at, please let us know. Jacob, anything to add?
Yeah, just that, we're always trying to, like as Dylan was saying, let us know if you have recommendations. It also helps us a lot as we're growing to give us a subscribe if you are new here, to like the video if you enjoyed it. And we want to just keep bringing you this content. So, let us know what to do. And thanks for watching.
Amazing. Thanks so much.